Good afternoon, everyone. And as just heard, we're between you and your refreshment break. So we'll aim to keep this as entertaining as we can. But I think it's opposite, because when I first had the privilege of moving to Dubai about 26 years ago, the only reason I came to this particular part of Dubai was over to what was then known as Dimsi, where Mina Siahi is now. There was nothing here. This whole stretch of Dubai was sand. And there was one resort out in the middle of nowhere that at weekends was the place to go if you lived in Dubai. When I come to this part of town now, I just marvel at the development that's happened in Dubai, and indeed it's a good proxy for the whole region in terms of development since then. But it was interesting. I was at a meeting recently where, with the leadership of the UAE, and the phrase that struck me the most was, "You think we're powering ahead. We think we've only caught up. Wait till you see what we do next." And I guess that's what's informing this brief session today, because what you see around you, what's been built to date, the sectors that are here are fantastic. This is a great country. But you look at where you need to look looking forward. Where's the country going to go next? New sectors, new industries. What are the enablers that are going to be in there? We've heard a lot of talk today on supply chain right across different industries, different segments. What we wanted to focus on in this brief session is the more capital intensive part of the trade chain, and some of the bigger developments that have been developed successfully in the country and will continue to be, and how those are financed in this market to continue to develop this part of the world. So before we get into some of the kind of the financing case study a bit, which Nacho will share a bit more, I just wanted to go through some of I guess the recipe for success here, if I may, just having grown up with a number of the companies here, as I'm sure many of you had. I was in a session earlier today where a gentleman was explaining that their business has been here since, I guess, before the country was founded, since the 50s, which is truly impressive. And seeing people having thrived, the mix of nationalities here, the openness to the market for attracting talent, a place for people to make money that in turn benefits the economy here. So I guess I mentioned the CapEx, and I think the development of the infrastructure to date here has been one of the key enablers. We've got a number of free zones that have been developed to complement the main jurisdiction of the country, that has allowed industries to develop over a number of decades. You've had infrastructure which, for many years was the build it and they will come model, I guess was the best way it could be described in the early years. A level of faith that was required when, there's been a lot of talk today about resilience and shock management. If you look at this part of the world, you can look at it two ways. You can look at it as the center of a massive land mass. You're right in the center of it, and you use that to your advantage. And I think Dubai in particular, with tourism, transport and trade, has done that exceptionally well. And I think the region is now replicating that in various ways. Or you can look at it the other way, where you've got pinch points in Straits of Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb and Suez Canal, and it can work both ways. But the level of infrastructure development that has happened here, that has then allowed people the scope to grow. So unlike maybe other parts of the world where there's more budgetary constraint, where you're building for maybe a bit of expansion, here the ability to build for a significant amount of expansion and let people grow to the extent that they can, to me has been a very defining part of the market here. I think also the ability to plan long-term, but execute quickly, has been a very important feature of this market. But this execution isn't necessarily linear. Those of you who've been here for the last few years will remember I came down from Abu Dhabi earlier today. 3 years ago, that wasn't a journey you could do because there was a barrier right across the road. But there are times when circumstances are needed. There are times where you need to adapt and change. And what I think what this part of the world is very good at is, even on an execution journey, is learning, adapting, continuing to move ahead and taking advantage of circumstances in the wider geography. And again, turning what could be a potential negative of the development of the market into a positive and continuing to power ahead here. So developing a predictable place where there's constant innovation, constant attraction of people, a place where people want to be based, a place where people associate with making money, and then understanding that you invest into the market and you're developing, and then you get a return as well. I think allied to that, then the development of regional champions. So similar to any geographic region, if you are developing a region, you have resources. Reference earlier to diversifying away from oil, but the hydrocarbon base here allows that development of that diversification, and then the development of regional champions. Case in point being DP World, who I remember when the acquisition of P&O and CSX Asia happened, right up to the focus on logistics today with recent acquisitions of Syncreon and Imperial Logistics to build a true multinational based out of the region. And be it Abu Dhabi, Saudi, elsewhere, those champions that have gone abroad, they've acquired IP, they've acquired technology and know-how, brought it back into the country, and then used that to develop the base. So no longer being at the end of the world's supply chain, but actually having an influence on it has been a very important model that's been developed here, and that's being rounded out, continually rounded out. So now it's gone beyond the traditional 3 Ts. It's gone into other earlier sectors were aluminium, semiconductors, food, of course, extremely important, healthcare, the push that we've seen across every sector, and now into newer sectors of the economy, such as AI and data centers, the whole chain of new sector economies where this part of the world has been able to leapfrog a certain amount of development elsewhere and be influential in terms of how these sectors are developed. And I think that in turn allows, in terms of the development of supply chain, in terms of investing and supplying into the market, gives a very good business case as to the mix of what's being looked at here, and the fact that you're still, despite, in the time I've been here, even over 2001, 2003, financial crash, you name it, this part of the world has continued to look beyond the near-term turbulence into what needs to be developed. And that gives investors and suppliers confidence to look at in building their businesses here. I guess last thing I'd say before maybe inviting Nacho to make a few comments on financing sources is we are very fortunate to be living in an open part of the world. There's a balance between East and West here, and there's lots of comments about nearshoring or friendshoring or how do you manage your supply chain going forward, resiliency, managing geopolitics. I think we are fortunate to be in a part of the world that balances, and I don't think any one influence will have primacy, maybe as the way they may have had in the past. And that allows then for a balance of supply sources, competitiveness coming into the market, making sure that the country prospers. Maybe I'll stop there and ask Nacho, in terms of the financing mix that you're seeing at the moment, that is going to power through the next wave. What are you seeing on some of the recent projects?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think, we are seeing a different tendency from what we used to see in the past. So at least on my side, which is more medium, long-term financing, the trend was very clear that there was a requirement to raise funding through different sources. Commercial banks, bonds, loans, and sukuks, international bank financing. And now we're finding that there's a new pillar out there, which used to be more inbound, but now we're seeing it outbound, which are export credit agencies. So export credit agencies are basically national agencies that they are there to support national exports. So in the past, until 3-4 years ago, Most of that investment we saw at inbound. So just to give a few examples nearby, Coca-Cola Arena here in Dubai was financed with ECA support. BIA head office in Sharjah was also financed with ECA support. And then you have many other players in the region. I mean, Aramco has tapped the ECA market in the past, SABIC, STC, MYF Iraq, and many others. What we are seeing is now that the economy is developing, there's a heavier industry here in the UAE. Mainly the GCC governments, although we see others in the Middle East like Egypt trending that way, is that they're looking to foster their exports and they're creating new agencies. You have one right here in this conference, which is Etihad Credit Insurance, which is the ECA of the UAE. They started business 4 or 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Most of what they do is more, again, what is this, the purpose of this conference, which is short-term products, but they also offer more medium long-term. But again, their key focus is mid long-term. We are seeing that competition is also starting. So Abu Dhabi, through Abu Dhabi Fund for Development, they have set up their own ECA, which is called Abu Dhabi Exports Office. They don't plan to compete with each other. But that gives something away. No, I mean, before, as I said, I was mainly focused on inbound business. While now you see that the UAE, I mean, Saudi and Qatar as well, and I touched on those a little bit later, are also focusing on fostering and again investing on those local companies to be able to export abroad. Through different instruments. That can be through insurance or guaranteed loans, or through direct loans like ADEX does. On that same path, you see Saudi that has created something similar through Saudi Exim. And the good thing about this is, I mean, ECAs or export credit agencies are very traditional. You have to comply with the OECD consensus in terms of the financing you can raise, and that has implications in terms of maximum tenor, the amount that you can finance under their cover, how it has to be a structure. While the local ECAs, given that they don't have to comply with the OECD, are much more flexible. And for example, a very interesting transaction that I saw on Saudi was Saudi Exim going into financing a transmission line connecting Saudi with Egypt, where the export was the power that was going through that transmission line to Egypt. An ECA would have never been able to look at an export that way, but Saudi Exim, I think it was, I mean, very creative and a great outcome, was able to support the transaction that way. I mean, we get lots of inquiries from these names. I mean, to support. I mean, you touch many of the sectors, no? Agricultural, aviation, anything which is value add. I mean, if it is fully produced in the UAE, even better. I mean, we're seeing, for example, things like defense, but many other sectors, no? So they want to transition. There is a clear path to transition from being mainly a heavy oil economy, oil or gas, towards more industrialized export base. So we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, another very interesting conversation, Qatar Development Bank, which is the Qatar ECA. I remember meeting them in Athens a couple of months ago, and they told me that, well, they're launching their products, but they told me, I mean, we actually had a very good opportunity to finance a stadium in the UK. So that's the Tottenham Stadium. Most of the steel that is coming from that stadium comes out of Qatar. So that gave me ideas, no, to think about other projects where those ECS could play a role, no. And obviously, I mean, I've been on the ground for 7 years now. But initially, when you come here, you only think about oil and gas, but there's much more than that. And luckily, the ECAs are playing a very big role there. Then you have, I mean, I guess the local ECAs, their role, which is support flows between countries. So again, we are seeing ECI, Qatar Development Bank, Saudi Exim, ADEX supporting those flows. I mean, in very recent transactions, we have seen something with another Middle East and North Africa name. There is a lot going out there, and it's a very interesting dialogue because they move away from what has been traditional ECAs, and again, think out of the box. I mean, being outside that consensus. So it's something. I mean, I was doing a similar forum with clients. I think it was 3 weeks ago in Riyadh, And I suddenly saw the list that I was presenting of ECAs, and it was on mainly the European, APAC, and Americas ECAs. And I suddenly realized, I'm covering MENA. Why is not my MENA ECAs on that list? So obviously, for the next presentation, we'll have them there. But it was not obvious, not to everyone. And then the number of inquiries that we receive on a daily basis from clients when it comes to ECA financing is there. And it's mainly outbound. A lot of it is outbound. So that is very positive to see. I don't know if Declan, you want to add anything else there?
Well, I think we're almost at time, but just thought in this 15 minutes give you a flavor of some of the activity that we are seeing in the market, not just inbound, but kind of homegrown activity here. It's a market that continues to power ahead, and one where we at JP Morgan are very excited and have more people on the ground here than we've ever had before. There's a number of colleagues in the audience and outside here, so look forward to catching up with you either at the booth or elsewhere, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.